Okay, so today I wanted to look at some ayat of Quran which speak about marriage, and in particular polygamy, which is the marriage to more than one woman at the same time. Right? And the reason I want to look at these ayats is because a lot of people may be considering Islam, but they may think that Islam is unfair or unjust to women, or that it is somehow promoting oppression. But when you read these ayat of Quran for yourself, you would see clearly that there's no injustice whatsoever in Islam. And also I want to demonstrate that there are no taboo sections of the Quran. Right? There are sections of the Bible, for instance, that you would not want to read to a child. You would not want to read certain sections of the Bible in church, where you would have, all sorts of graphic descriptions of intercourse. You'd have rape, men of God patronizing and sleeping with prostitutes, drunkenness, debauchery, orgies, incest. You'd have human sacrifice, child sacrifice. You'd have men having 700 wives, up to 700 women at the same time, wives and concubines. All these sorts of things you would find in the Bible. And then these are the people who would critique the Quran and say that it is oppressive. Right? But let's look at what the Quran says about this topic of marriage and polygamy. Right? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإن خفتم ألا تقسطوا في اليتامى. And if you fear that you will not do justice by the orphans. Of course, the previous ayah spoke about orphans and that you have to give them their wealth and not eat up their wealth and whatnot. Right? So this is a continuation of the topic. It says, and if you fear that you will not be able to do justice by the orphans, فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ. Then marry who is pleasing to you from among the women. And of course, there are other ayat of Quran which would specify who you can marry. You can't just marry any woman you like. It is specified who you can marry. There are certain women who we cannot marry. For example, women who worship idols, for instance. Right? Such women are forbidden to us. We are permitted to marry women from among the people of the book, which according to scholarly consensus are the Jews and the Christians. Right? We are permitted to marry them, providing that they are pure and chaste women. Right? So it is very specific who we can marry. Mathna wa thulatha wa ruba'. 2, 3, or 4. Right? So the instruction is to marry 2, 3, or 4 women. And this is where the polygamy comes in. That men are given permission to marry 2, 3, or 4. But here the next part that a lot of people often leave out. فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً. And if you fear that you will not be just to them, if you fear that you will not be fair to them, فَوَاحِدَةً, then only one. And this is what differentiates the Quran from other books, from other religious books. The Quran is the only religious book that says to marry only one woman. Of course, in the Bible, there are many cases where prophets and men of God married more than one woman. You have Abraham, Solomon, all of these are examples, right? Even Moses, they had more than one woman, more than one wife, right? So this is not something strange to the scriptures, right? But the Quran says, فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. And if you fear that you will not do justice by them, فَوَاحِدَةً, then only one. أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. Or from who your right hand possess. Right? So this brings up another topic. From whom your right hand possess. When you go into war, in self-defense, those who lose the war, they become prisoners of war. Right? So these prisoners of war are considered whom your right hand possess. They are the booty or the bounty of war, and they are considered whom your right hand possess. So you are told to marry only one, or who your right hand possess, or from among the prisoners of war. ذَلِكَ أَدْنَا أَلَّا تَحُولُوا. That is more appropriate, so that you do not swerve into injustice. Right? So this is the ayah, this is the famous ayah of Quran, where people say men are permitted to marry 2, 3, or 4. But they leave out this part. Right? فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً. And if you fear that you will not be able to be just and fair by them, then only one. And what does this entail? Right? There are other parts of the Quran which say men are the protectors and maintainers of women, because Allah caused one to excel. Allah gave one more favors than the other. And because men provide for them out of their means, men take from their wealth and they spend from their wealth on women. Right? This is verse number 34 of the same surah. So Allah says, righteous women are devoutly obedient and guard in their absence what Allah would have them guard. So men have the responsibility to protect and maintain women, and we have to spend on them from out of our means. So all of this has to be considered. فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً. If you cannot do justice by 2, 3, or 4, then only one. Right? Because remember, you have to provide and spend out of your means on these women. Right? And consider the cost of this. Food, clothing, and shelter. This is your responsibility. Even if a woman is working, a woman is not obligated to have a job. You know, if it's your wife, but if she does have a job, her money is hers. You cannot tell that woman to spend her money, right? You cannot command her to spend her money on food, clothing, and shelter. Right? That's your wife. So food, clothing, and shelter for that woman, as well as whatever children you have by her, is your responsibility as a man. Right? So you are told if you cannot do justice by them, then only one. And of course, this is not only a financial consideration, because doing justice by women is not only financial justice. Of course, you have to be fair in what you spend on them. You have to provide the same sort of accommodation, the same quality of clothing and food and whatnot to all the women, right? If you have more than one, you have to provide the same sort of provisions and whatnot for each of them. But this is not all that should be considered. Being fair by them would include spending equal amounts of time with them, right? There would be physical considerations as well. You know, if you are unable to keep 4 women, you know, satisfied, if you understand what I'm saying, then you should consider only one. Of course, if you're buying gifts, you know, you're expected to buy the same quality and level of gifts for each of them. You're expected to split up your time. You know, there should be even a timetable where you'd spend the same amount of time with each, right? It is more appropriate for women to live in separate houses, that you would not have the women living in the same house. You know, there are rules to go with this whole topic of polygamy. You know, there's 2 sets of groceries, right? You have to buy them clothes. You know, you have to be just. You have to give them an allowance, you know, if that's how you choose to handle it. Respect their property. If you fear that you cannot be just by them in this regard, then only one, right? Or from whom your right hand possess. And we discussed that before. ذَلِكَ أَدْنَا أَلَّا تَعُولُوا. That is more appropriate, so that you do not swerve into injustice. Right? So look at how much times injustice and being fair is mentioned in this ayah. People say that Islam is unjust and unfair and oppressive. Right? But here we see, right? وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى. If you fear that you will not be just, that you will not do justice by the orphans. So that's one. Justice is mentioned. Then we see here, فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. And if you fear that you will not be fair and just by the women, فَوَاحِدَةً, and then only one. Then the verse finishes off by saying, ذَلِكَ أَدْنَا أَلَّا تَعُولُوا. That is more appropriate, so that you do not swerve into injustice and oppression. Right? So 3 times we see justice and fairness and the whole concept of being just mentioned in this ayah that people say is unjust. Allah says 3 times. And of course, He knows best. We see people that try to prevent men from having the facility to marry more than one woman, right? They modify their religion. You know, all the prophets in their religion have more than one wife, with the exception of Jesus and Adam. Because Adam was the first man and he just had one wife, right? Because all the others would have been his children. And then you have Jesus, who did not get married as yet, right? We Muslims believe that when he returns, he will get married and live a normal life. Right, but these two prophets, you find that they had only one wife in Adam's case and no wife in Jesus' case. Peace be unto them. Right, but all the other prophets, there are so many examples of prophets having more than one wife. Yet still, the Christians limit themselves to one wife. right? They ignore the example of all the prophets, and they limit themselves to one wife. And this is causing a lot of problems. You have a whole new religion that was formed off of this, where King Henry, he wanted a wife that could produce a son for him or something like that. I'm not advocating that boys should be preferred over girls or anything, but this is something that he did, where he modified his entire religion and split away from the Catholics and become an Anglican. Right? He invented a whole new religion that would allow divorce. Right? By the way, the Bible don't even permit divorce. The Bible says that divorce is not permitted, right? So he created his whole religion that would allow divorce so that he could get another wife and all of that. If he was following the prophets, he could have simply married another wife without having to divorce, without having to invent this whole religion and whatnot. Right? And if he was following the prophets as well, the truth, then he could have divorced the first wife if he so pleased. You know, it's something that is disliked by the Creator, but it is still permissible. Right? So that's when you read the scriptures for yourself. It is not unjust in any way, form, or fashion. And give the woman a charitable free gift. Right? This, of course, refers to the mahar, or the dowry. In Islam, you're required to give women a dowry. So this is another financial consideration, right, for those who are intending to have more than one wife, that you have to give a dowry to each woman upon marriage. فَإِن تُبْنَ لَكُمْ عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِّنْهُ نَفْسًا, and if she remits any of it to you, if she gives back any of this dowry to you, فَكُلُوهُ هَنِيئًا مَرِيئًا, then take it, right, and enjoy it in satisfaction and ease. So the woman has the discretion whether she wants to give it back to you. She does not have to. The Quran does not say that she has to give back any of it to you. But it says if she does, then you have to enjoy it in satisfaction and ease. Right? And take it. Don't refuse it. So this dowry, right, it varies according to the means of the man. You have people giving women land. Others may give a woman a car. Others may give her money. Right? Large sums of money. I've heard up to 400,000 euros or something like that. That was given to a woman upon marriage. Right? So it's supposed to be something significant according to the means and the abilities of the man, according to his financial capabilities, according to his possessions. He's supposed to give something significant to this woman as a gift, as a free charitable gift upon marriage. This is the dowry. Of course, this dowry was in practice in Christianity, right, among the kings and queens and whatnot. They would give a dowry, but this dowry would go to the family. Here, the dowry is directly payable to the woman upon marriage. So it's a gift to the woman, not to her family. Nobody else is going to benefit from this. And of course, in Hinduism, you have the dowry being paid to the man, which you could argue as to whether that makes sense or not. But here we see the dowry is payable to the woman. And if she chooses to give you back some of it, then enjoy it in satisfaction and ease. Right, so that's just a brief look at these ayat of Quran which speak about polygamy. Right? It's something to prevent injustice rather than to cause injustice. Think about the fact that there are more women than men being created by the Creator. If every man were to take one woman each, then you would have a surplus of women who are unable to find husbands. Right? This is something across the board, except in countries where you find that they kill the girl child. Countries such as India and China, where they murder the girl child because they prefer boys. Right? You find that women tend to outnumber men in most populations. So if you go with a one-to-one policy, then there's a surplus of women. Right? And consider also that people that limit themselves to one wife, they end up in a situation where adultery, it is on the increase, because we're talking about the nature of man here. This is the Creator who sent down this book. So he knows the nature of man. Right? So those who are so inclined, they are permitted to have more than one wife. And those who limit men, right, this is going against natural law. This is going against the nature, right, in which the man was created. So you find that even in our country, you find that the land is littered with brothels and guest houses. And you find that these places are always filled. And what is going on in these places? Adultery. Right? Because Men are being told that they could only have one wife. If it is these men were following this law that was sent on by God, they would have simply married to the other woman instead of having secret relationships and all the emotional turmoil that results from this. Right? You could marry the other woman, right, and have her officially as your wife. This is more respectable. It's more respectable for a woman to be a wife, a second wife or a third wife, than to be a mistress, than to be someone's outside woman, a secret, where you have no rights, no sort of demands you could make. You have to stay quiet. While the man is happy with his family, you are just some outside woman that he visits when he pleases. This is unjust, right? This is unjust, and this is the injustice that Allah has outlawed here in the Quran. If anyone deviates from this ayah, this is the law of God, the Creator, that was set down here. Anyone who deviates from this, right, is serving towards injustice. There is no better system of marriage than this. And when people deviate from this, the evidence is clear. There's empirical evidence, right, that the end result of deviation from this, right, is emotional, societal turmoil, where you have adultery, illegitimate children, you have marriages breaking up because of infidelity, you have women not being provided for and respected, you have these outside women, these mistresses, you have prostitution. If someone were to marry those women who are prostitutes and provide for them, they would be a respectable wife rather than be working themselves in some brothel somewhere, sleeping with the entire society. They could be someone's wife. And this is far more respectable than to be working in a brothel. Right? All those women in the guest houses who go in on a lunchtime with the co-worker and the boss and whatnot. These women could be someone's wife instead of being someone's side chick. And this is far more respectable. And anyone who argues otherwise, how has your system worked out for you? Because clearly we see in Trinidad and Tobago that prostitution is against the law, but yet still the police not doing anything about it. Everyone knows where all the brothels are. We know where the brothels are. And there are married men who are going to these brothels. Right? You have this whole case of the Venezuelan woman being exploited. If someone were to marry those women, they would be more respectable. It would be better for them if someone were to marry them, than to have all these women being exploited all about the place. So this system of marriage here is better for human beings. It's the best system. And those who swerve from this, right, they end up oppressing and being unjust to women and being unjust to themselves and causing harm to the society and the world at large. Right? So those who were looking for injustice, right, in these verses of Quran, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I can clearly see injustice and oppression in whatever other system that you have chosen. Whether it be that you say men could only marry one woman and then those men go on to have adulterous relationships and patronize prostitutes and whatnot, or whether it be that you do not pay the woman a gift, a dowry, right? You're marrying women and you're not paying them a dowry, so that woman has nothing to fall back on. And then you have her there and she's just, you're not providing food, clothing, and shelter to her, and you just have her there suffering. There are people like that who don't provide any sort of maintenance to their wives. They be unjust. Whereas in Islam, we are told to spend out of your means, right? To be the protectors and maintainers of women. We are told to provide for them. And that's our responsibility, right? We have that responsibility. It's not really a responsibility in other ways of life. You find that is almost optional, and that women have to work hard and earn their portion in order to live. This is not necessary. They have to make children, right? When they are making children and they are going through this pains of pregnancy and whatnot, why should they have to be out there in the workplace? Why should they have to leave their children in a daycare? That's your responsibility. A woman should not have to work in order to see about herself while she's pregnant, and she should not have to work to see about herself when she's breastfeeding your child. Right? And this system that you have invented, this is worse off for the family and worse off for the society than what Allah has ordained here. Right? Women, we take up our responsibility in Islam to spend out of our means and to treat the women justly and fairly. Right? And we don't want a situation where women end up being prostitutes and side chicks to married men. Right? This doesn't make any sense. And this would lead to the destruction of both men and women involved in such relationships, whether it be fornication, adultery, or prostitution. This would lead to the destruction of both parties involved in such relationships. Right? So this is the more respectable way. It's more respectable to have more than one wife than to have a wife and some outside woman, as many of you Trinidadians are doing. You know? So consider this. And if you were looking for injustice, I'm sorry to disappoint you.